They called her a freak. I called her a friend. And what she taught me changed everything I thought I knew about love. Hello, my darlings. My name is Ruth. I'm 87 years old, and I've lived through wars, weddings, heartbreaks, and a few questionable fashion trends. But nothing has stayed with me quite like the story I'm about to tell you. Before we begin, I want to know something. Where are you watching from? Type your country in the comments. I love seeing how far my stories travel. It reminds me that even though we're scattered across oceans and borders, we're stitched together by stories. Now, let me take you back to a time when I was younger, but still old enough to know better, to a girl named Layla. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy. She walked like she was trying not to be seen. But even in her silence, there was something about her that made you look twice. I met her at a community center in California. I was volunteering, teaching young girls how to sew and how to speak up. Layla came in wearing a loose shawl, her eyes darting like she was afraid someone might recognize her. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice was soft, like a secret. It took weeks before she told me she had 4 breasts. Yes, 4. 2 where they're supposed to be, and 2 more, slightly lower, slightly smaller, but very real. She said it like she was confessing a crime. I remember the way her hands trembled. I remember the way she looked down, as if expecting me to flinch, but I didn't, because I saw her, not the condition, not the shame, her. She told me she had something called polymastia, a rare condition. Doctors said it wasn't dangerous, just different. But the world doesn't like different, does it? She'd been teased in school, called names I won't repeat. Boys laughed, girls whispered. Even her own mother told her to stay covered. So she did. She wore layers even in the summer. She avoided swimming pools, weddings, mirrors. She told me once, I feel like a monster in my own skin. And I didn't know what to say, because how do you comfort someone who's been taught to hate their own body? So I listened, and sometimes that's enough. We became friends. She'd come over for tea. I'd tell her stories from my youth, about heartbreaks and revolutions and the time I accidentally dyed my hair green. She'd laugh, and when she laughed, she forgot to hide. But even laughter has its limits, because every time she looked in the mirror, she saw the thing the world wouldn't let her forget. One day she asked me, "Do you think anyone could ever love me?" I said, "Only someone who deserves you." She didn't believe me, not yet. But that's the thing about stories. They don't end where you expect them to. This was just the beginning. She was 23 when she met him, Daniel. He was tall, with a crooked smile, and a voice that made poetry sound like music. He worked at a bookstore, wore glasses, and always smelled faintly of old paper and jasmine. Layla met him by accident. She dropped a book. He picked it up. Their hands touched. And just like that, something shifted. They started talking, first about books, then about life, then about everything in between. He didn't stare. He didn't ask questions she feared. He made her feel normal. She told me about him with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "He doesn't know," she said. "About your condition?" I asked. She nodded. "I want to tell him, but I'm scared." I didn't push her, because some truths take time. Weeks passed. They grew closer. He took her to the beach. She wore a shawl. He didn't ask why. He wrote her poems. She saved everyone. And then she told him. She invited him over, made chai, wore her simplest clothes. And when the moment came, she said it, softly, bravely. "I have 4 breasts." He blinked, laughed nervously, thought she was joking. She wasn't. He didn't yell. He didn't insult her, but he didn't stay. He left, quietly, without finishing his tea. She didn't cry that night. She didn't scream. She just sat there, staring at the empty cup he left behind. And I wished I could take her pain and wear it for a day, just so she could breathe. Love is a strange thing. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask permission. It just walks in, sometimes with muddy shoes, and rearranges everything. Layla was 23 when she met Daniel. He wasn't perfect, but he was kind. And for a girl who'd spent her whole life hiding, kindness felt like sunlight. He worked at a bookstore, tall, lean, with a crooked smile, and a voice that made poetry sound like prayer. He smelled like old paper and jasmine. I remember the way Layla described him, like she was reciting a dream. They met by accident. She dropped a book. He picked it up. Their hands touched. And just like that, something shifted. He didn't stare. He didn't ask why she wore layers in the heat. He didn't flinch when she hesitated to speak. He saw her, or at least she thought he did. They started talking. First about books, then about life, then about everything in between. He told her about his childhood in Florida. She told him about her love for Urdu poetry. He laughed at her jokes. She memorized his favorite verses. It was gentle. It was slow. It was the kind of love that tiptoes in, afraid to break anything. And for the first time in years, Layla felt normal. She told me about him with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "He doesn't know," she said. "About your condition?" I asked. She nodded. "I want to tell him, but I'm scared." I didn't push her, because some truths take time. Weeks passed. They grew closer. He took her to the beach. She wore a shawl. He didn't ask why. He wrote her poems. She saved everyone. And then she told him. She invited him over, made chai, wore her simplest clothes. And when the moment came, she said it, softly, bravely. "I have 4 breasts." He blinked, laughed nervously, thought she was joking. She wasn't. He didn't yell. He didn't insult her. But he didn't stay. He left, quietly, without finishing his tea. She didn't cry that night. She didn't scream. She just sat there, staring at the empty cup he left behind. And I wished I could take her pain and wear it for a day, just so she could breathe. The days that followed were heavy. She stopped coming to the center, stopped replying to my messages. I went to her house. She didn't open the door. I left a note. "You are not your body. You are your bravery." A week later she came back. Her eyes were tired. Her voice was quiet. "He didn't even say goodbye," she whispered. "He just left." I held her hand, and for a long time we didn't speak, because sometimes silence is the only language grief understands. She told me she felt stupid for believing, for hoping. She said, "I thought if I loved him enough, he'd stay." I said, "Love isn't a test you pass. It's a truth you live." But she wasn't ready to hear that. Not yet. She started wearing more layers, stopped looking in mirrors, stopped laughing. It was like watching a flower curl back into the soil, and I didn't know how to help. So I did what I always do. I told her a story about a girl I knew in 1952. She had a limp. Boys teased her. She thought she'd never be loved. Until one day she danced anyway, alone, in the rain. And someone saw her. Not the limp, not the shame. Her. That girl was me. Layla smiled, just a little, and that was enough. Some wounds don't bleed. They whisper. They linger. They shape the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you love. After Daniel left, Layla didn't cry. Not in front of me, not in front of anyone, but I saw it. In the way she folded her shawl tighter, in the way she stopped laughing at my stories, in the way she avoided mirrors like they were enemies. She didn't just lose a boy, she lost the hope that someone could love her as she was. And that kind of loss, it doesn't scream, it sinks. Weeks passed. She came to the center less often. When she did, she sat in the corner, sewing quietly, her eyes distant. One day I asked her, "Do you want to talk?" She shook her head, but then she whispered, "I want to change." I didn't understand at first. "Change what?" I asked. She looked down. My body. She'd been researching, late at night, on borrowed Wi-Fi, On forums where women shared stories, some kind, some cruel, she found a surgeon, private clinic, expensive, but possible. She had already said everything that mattered. Some stories end with weddings, some with funerals, but the ones that stay with you, they end with wisdom. Layla didn't marry Daniel. She didn't chase closure. She didn't need validation. She chose herself. And in doing so, she taught me something I wish I'd learned decades earlier. Love isn't about symmetry. It isn't about smooth skin or perfect proportions. It's about presence. It's about truth. I watched her grow, not like a flower, like a forest. She became someone who didn't ask for permission. She wrote poems that made people cry. She wore her scars like medals. And when people asked her, "Why didn't you take him back?" she'd smile and say, "Because I finally met someone who loved me exactly as I am, me." I've lived a long life. I've seen beauty standards change like seasons. I've seen girls starve themselves for approval. I've seen boys chase illusions. But Layla, she reminded me that the soul has no shape, no weight, no flaw, and if someone can't love your soul, they don't deserve your body. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt unworthy, ever felt too different, too broken, too much, remember Layla. She had 4 breasts, and she carried them with grace until she didn't have to anymore. But the real transformation wasn't surgical, it was spiritual. She stopped apologizing for existing, and that is love. If this story touched you, subscribe to Ruth Grandma's channel, like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because stories heal, and healing begins with truth. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening.